Hey folks, BlackCross here, and welcome back to another video game review. And today's review, we're going to be talking about Ratchet Clank Rift Apart. Yes, another PlayStation 5 game, shortly after beating Astro's Playroom. I kind of beat both of them and platinum them on the same week. It's one of those things where it's like, I beat Astro Boy, played through Ratchet Clank Rift Apart, and then I was like, well, let's look at the trophies and see how many is left. And I was like, wow, I've almost got it done. Didn't take long to platinum either one, so this is technically my second platinum trophy for the PlayStation 5. And needless to say, this game is awesome. I love it. I really, really love it. But I want to go ahead and stress something about this particular review. And that is the fact that I had a slight euphoria, if you will, of like memories of like experiencing the Ratchet Clank series. I've practically played almost all of them, with the exception of like the PSP games, and then technically 2 that was released on the PlayStation 3. And I played the demo for Assault, and it didn't feel good. So I didn't play Into the Nexus afterwards, but then of course we had the Ratchet Clank reboot that was released on the PlayStation 4. And I like the movie, I like the game. There's some complaints that I have with it. For example, I don't like how they rebooted Ratchet. But on some X's, it didn't bother me too badly. I was very entertained regardless of either game. So needless to say, I have no major complaint about the series, you know? It's one of those things where it's like, because of how long it's went through, it's had so much done to it that you can easily like say why you like this one or why you don't like this one and stuff like that. And my personal favorite Ratchet Clank game, my personal favorite, is Deadlock. That is my personal absolute favorite Ratchet Clank game. Personally for me, it has some of the best weapons in the game, really awesome story, excellent humor with it and stuff like that. But with all that being said, what are my overall thoughts on Rift Apart? Well, from the very get-go, it's amazing. It's an amazing looking game. It's very beautiful. Graphically, it's very nicely detailed. I just love seeing the fur textures of both Rivet and Ratchet, followed by the metal texture of Dr. Nefarious. Needless to say, all of it is absolutely gorgeous looking. More so, I imagine, if I was able to view it on 4K. If I could even remotely see it, of course, mind you. But that being said, though, it's still an amazing looking game, and in all honesty, I absolutely love it. Biggest first thing that I like about the game is that you can choose options in terms of like resolution rate, followed by frame rate, which is rare to see in video games nowadays. You rarely see a frame rate option, you know, and I want to go ahead and stress that. And the reason why I want to stress that is because some people don't like 60 frames. Some people don't like it. Some people prefer 30 frames per second. Needless to say, I can understand why. There's a lot of reasons why you would want to stay in that 30 frames per second. There's a lot of performance in terms of like being able to enjoy the game and stuff like that. But 60 frames, for me, it's a lot smoother experience. For me, I enjoy having a game at 60 frames per second. The games don't have to be at 4K because I don't care much for the 4K resolution part, but I do want it to at least be 60 frames per second. And I got to try it out on both occasions because you could change the options in-game. And I prefer 60 frames, but I'm glad that they have the option for people who wants to stay in that 30 frames per second. It's a nice little flow for people who may like it one way and want it another different way. It's viable options, if you will. It's sort of like the same way of how I wish every video game had an audio adjustment to where you can adjust the music versus the battle versus the voice audio, you know? I want to have that freedom because, quite frankly, sometimes music is a little too loud to where you can't even remotely hear what they're saying, you know? It's like, if you're gonna make music so freaking loud, at least let me have the option to lower it to where I can at least remotely hear the characters talk. So, yeah. But, needless to say, I'm glad they give that option and it's an option that I wish was in every game going forward, especially now with the PlayStation 5. We have the ability to where we can experience the game with ray tracing, high resolution, so on and so forth. If you're going to make it a PC experience, at least let us have the choice to experience it however way we choose it. And I'm glad this game does that. Okay, there's a lot to unpack. So let's first start off by explaining the story. The story of Ratchet & Clank literally takes place probably somewhere after Into the Nexus. This literally does not take place after the reboot series, for those that are asking. In fact, I'm pretty sure it makes no reference, or if it does, it's more of an inside joke. But, which that's Ratchet & Clank's humor, is all of his inside jokes that it makes throughout the series and stuff like that. For example, if you're familiar with, oh look, the plumber's back, you'll know the joke. You know, it's one of those things. But, that being said, so this takes place literally after Into the Nexus, where they're basically celebrating Ratchet & Clank as being like an iconic hero of the galaxy, and Dr. Nefarious comes back and trying to defeat Ratchet & Clank, and his ideal is that the only way he can do this is if he goes to another dimension where he always wins. To which, surprisingly, he succeeds in that. And it's funny because the entire time, while he got to experience that feeling, he didn't technically win. You know, he still has to put up with not one, but 2 Lombaxes now. So it's kind of interesting of how Dr. Nefarious, yes, he's in a dimension where he always wins. At the same time, he still has to put up with 2 Lombaxes. So I still find that kind of humorous. Unfortunately, they didn't keep the humor that Dr. Nefarious has been known for, where when he kind of gets a little, I suppose the word I'm looking for, psychotic, he all of a sudden glitches up and it plays like this soap opera saying. Unfortunately, that running joke unfortunately sounds like it's been killed off. But I kind of wish it would come back if they ever make another Ratchet & Clank game, because that was always the funniest thing, because Dr. Nefarious having that one little glitch is just humorous to me, because anytime he stops at that moment in time, it's always hilarious, because there's always that moment of like the robots are like, should we help him? Other robots like, I don't know if we should. And then Lawrence is like, proceed. And he's like, alright. And they just slap him. I love that joke too much. Dr. Nefarious is the funniest villain in video game history. There's a lot of villains that kind of come close to Nefarious, but Nefarious is just the funniest. He's sort of like the Disney-esque humor villain, like Captain Hook and then Prince John. He's just a hilarious villain all in all. Ratchet and Clank, obviously, they're a perfect duo. Unfortunately, though, they kind of interchange in a way, you know? Ratchet is left alone for a period of time, only to eventually meet up with another character by the name of Kit, who happens to be the alternate dimension version of Clank. And then Clank is teamed up with Rivet, who is an alternate dimension version of Ratchet. And you'll kind of see this kind of going throughout the entire time you're playing the game. You'll see alternate dimension versions of various of characters that you're familiar with. Not always, but somewhere you'll be familiar with most of them. It's pretty cool just to kind of see the ultra-dimensional side of things, because that's kind of like the new trend that's going on these days, is alternate dimension. We've kind of went through the ideal of like intergalaxy exploration and stuff like that. Now we're into the multiverse ideal, where alternate ideals, alternate details that, you know, we could have went through and stuff like that, you know? It's like, what would have happened if one person was born as a female rather than a male? What would have happened if we went through this disaster instead of being able to prevent it and stuff like that, you know? There was a theory that was stated years ago where it was like, for every cause and effect, there's always an opposite end, and therefore it created an alternate universe. So in other words, there's like millions and millions of different versions of this world where there's like different versions of ourselves. For example, for all we know, back whenever the dinosaurs came around, the meteor could have crashed it, and instead of destroying all of the dinosaurs, it could have mutated them into an alternate species, and we could have all been different dinosaurs, which some of us would have been T-Rexes with freaking short arms. I love the story. The story is so charming, but I love Rivet. I love Rivet too much. I have to say, when I first saw Rivet, I was like, I kind of like her. I don't know why, I kind of like her. And then playing the game more and more and getting to know Rivet more and more, I really, really love Rivet. I hope they continue on this story segment with Rivet and Ratchet team up and stuff like that, if they do another one, which I imagine they will. I mean, at this point in time, the fact that the Ratchet & Clank series has survived 3 console generations onto the 4th one is a monumentous occasion. I mean, heck, Jak and Daxter and Sly Cooper sadly has not made a return. So the fact that of the 3, Ratchet & Clank has survived is astounding. So yeah, if they can continue the story, let them continue, I say. The story is great and all, but gameplay has changed slightly differently. There are still similar to past events, but they've been slightly altered and slightly tweaked to make the gameplay experience a lot more unique, and I arguably say a lot better, actually, in all honesty. For example, when you finally get the hover boots, you can actually kind of hover faster throughout the entire world. So it makes, whenever you go back to previous worlds, easier to traverse in, because as you're kind of going back through these worlds, collecting like gold bolts and then other collectibles that you might have missed and stuff like that, it makes it easy just to traverse the world with that hover boot feature. And then the dodge mechanic, I actually like this dodge mechanic, you know? The dodge mechanic, yes, you still have this normal dodge where you're trying to avoid the enemy just hopping back and forth, but then you have like this weird alternate warp move where you're just kind of like whoop, whoop. I like that. But then it's also used in platforming, which it's hard for me to get my head around that ideal of like Ratchet & Clank, instead of just focus on combat, it's also somewhat more platformy. And I'm like, huh, this is weird. I'm not used to this, you know? I'm not used to a Ratchet & Clank game being this platformy, you know? And that's not to say it's bad, you know? It's one of those things where it's like, if it's done well, it would be best to use it. And it's actually been modified really, really well. I actually like how they fixed up the gameplay mechanic and the movements and just used every little thing to its advantages. Every little new thing they've done, while it doesn't drastically change the gameplay, it's a nice feel in terms of platforming. For example, whenever you enter in other worlds and stuff like that, and you see these different rifts that you can break through and stuff, they're more like little obstacle courses that you can traverse in. And they feel good, they don't hinder in terms of gameplay. And the best part is, unlike in, say, like Ratchet Clank Future Tools of Destruction, back when it first came out on the PlayStation 3, trying to innovate the 6-axis movement, which I absolutely hated, they don't use any innovative mechanic in regards to the PlayStation 5. They just make a Ratchet & Clank game, which is great, you know? Don't do anything innovative if you feel like it hinders it, you know? Instead, just try to improve it. And they've improved a lot in the gameplay. And that's really great. I love that. I love the fact that they've done that, and it feels really, really good. The weapons, I have to say, some of them I felt like wasn't really that good. And you know, whenever you play a number of Ratchet & Clank games, you can easily pick apart the weapons and be like, oh yeah, this is top tier, this is low tier, this sucks, this is great, this is awesome, this is the best, this is the worst. You know, there's so many different weapons in the series that you can easily make a tier list on its own and pick apart what weapons is considered the god tier and which one is just the dumpster fire. In this case, I don't think there's a bad weapon at all. It's just a matter of how you would use them. For example, there was this one weapon where it's like a water hose thing, and it basically sprouts plants at the enemy, and it just kind of paralyzes them, you know, kind of freezes them in place and stuff. And I'm kind of like, why would I use that? And it wasn't until I started actually using that particular weapon that I started to realize how well it could be, especially if you level it up more, if you upgraded it higher and stuff like that, you know? It actually is really, really good, and I'm fairly surprised as to how some of these weapons are. There isn't a Mr. Sirkong, sadly, in this one. Well, there is, but you don't use him. He's just a character. But you do have a Mr. Fungus, which is kind of like Mr. Sirkong in a way, except slightly different. It doesn't feel any different than Mr. Sirkong would have been, but it's pretty cool to see that you can use it just as versatile as you could have been with any other weapon. In fact, with both that and one other weapon, I found that there's no hindrance of limits of, like, how many you can launch, you know? It's weird, because I could have launched 4 Mr. Funguses, and then of another weapon, which I'm not going to spoil every weapon, but I'm just going to mention a handful of weapons that you could probably do fairies of stuff with. You can launch multiple versions, and it's just like, holy crap, this game can handle it. This is really good. I love the shortcut menu that it has. Needless to say, that was very interesting. Like, the second I noticed that as I was near to beating the game. I saw that little thing, and I was like, wait. And that was accidentally pushing the D-pad when I had the wheel up. Which, if you want to use a wheel, you just press the triangle button and it just shows it up of all the different weapons you could use. But for some reason I found that there was a shortcut thing, which I did not see. I never noticed that. So then I used it and it's like, holy crap, this is really good. So if you have like a set number of weapons that you're specifically using at any point in time, or particular favorite weapons that you prefer to use at any point in time, you can just press the directional button while in combat and it immediately throws it out there. It's perfect. Going back to the whole options thing, you can even choose the option of rather things slow down as you have the level up of your nanotech leveling up, or as it pops up the menu saying that your weapon has leveled up and stuff. You know, that kind of makes the game standardized and stuff like that because it's been a thing for years, but you can actually choose to either have that off or on. And I love that. It makes the game flow well. Record, you do kind of lose track of what weapons have already leveled up and stuff like that at this point, but you could just keep playing. Things don't interrupt. Nothing flashes right in front of your face except for the debris of enemies that kind of blow up in front of your face. So, I mean, it works really well. It's all really, really good. I do, however, have a couple of complaints. Complaint number 1. The arena. If you don't know, Ratchet Clank for years has been known for having these arena matches. And these are good ways to either A, level up your nanotech, B, level up your weapons, or C, earn gold bolt. Or earn, not gold bar, wow. Or 3, earn bolts, which is your currency of the game, of course. And that's always been a thing. But in this game's case, there's even a way that you can grind for Raritanium, which is great because Raritanium is used in order to upgrade the mod feature for your weapons, which will help make them stronger or make them better, depending on the situation and stuff. So that's really great to have it. But I have to say, there's not enough arena matches, you know? Depending on who you are and depending on how the arena matches are, there's no arena match that makes it stand out being like, oh yeah, grind on this particular arena and it will give you a lot of enemies to where you can level up with and stuff like that, you know? It's not that great. I would argue to say, again, going back to Deadlock, I like the Deadlock because it's all an arena match type thing. So, I guess depending on how you feel, depends on how you feel about this one. But I felt like that one could have been better, you know, there could have been a little bit more arenas and stuff like that. But who's to say, I don't know. Depending on how you play through this game, it could feel either relatively short or it could feel relatively easy. For me personally, this is probably one of the easiest platinum trophies that I've got in a Ratchet & Clank game. It's literally one of the easiest ones. There isn't a trophy for getting all gold bolts, you just have to get 5 of them and then that's all you need. There's a trophy for getting all the weapons, but not all Omega weapons, which is actually surprising. And there isn't a trophy for like max nanotech. And there's not a trophy for beating it on challenge mode or beating it on the hardest difficulty. I would say this is actually one of the more easier Ratchet & Clank games that a person could platinum. I think it is. So, depending on who you are, this may be probably one of the more easier ones that you want to play through, or it could be the hardest one, depending on how sadistic you can be. I would say I would give this one an easy 4 out of 5. Like I said, there's a few little things that I would kind of tweak up a bit more. For example, I would have added a couple more weapons, probably a few favorite weapons. It still has a lot of favorite weapons inside of it and stuff like that. A lot of returning, a lot of new, but at the same time, it's a pretty good standard progression of a Ratchet & Clank game, you know? We've got so many Ratchet & Clanks these days, you could easily do like a freaking top 10 at this point, and you would have plenty to go through and stuff like that. But it's one of those things where it's like, because of how we've went through the generations of Ratchet and Clank, with the PlayStation 2 and then moving on to the PlayStation 3, and then the one PlayStation 4 game we've got, this one's relatively good. I like it. I really like this one. So I highly recommend it, especially if you're a fan of the Ratchet & Clank series. If you're a fan of the Ratchet & Clank series and you're planning on getting a PlayStation 5, definitely pick this one up. It's really good. Gosh, I can't even talk right now. You're really going to enjoy it, I promise. Anyway guys, that's going to be it for this review. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you in the next video. This is BlackCross signing off. Catch you guys later.
Dislodge it and stop the planet from shattering. Normally I'd say that's against protocol, but this is the free post-apocalypse world we live in, so go for it!